Hello, everybody. My name is Duncan McLean. I am a Director of Landscape Architecture with LUC based in Glasgow. I'm going to talk about the Claypits project, which is a project that we have worked on getting on 8 or 9 years, although it was complete last year. So 10 minutes is quite a short length of time to give you the story, but I'll do my best. The project came from, or was born from, a couple of strategic studies that we undertook for the Glasgow Canal Regeneration Partnership, which is a partnership of Glasgow City Council and Scottish Canals. And it was kind of in recognition that the Glasgow Canal, which runs through the north of the city, kind of sat in, this is an extract from the multiple index of deprivation, where the deeper the red color, the more deprived the areas are, and the colder, the bluer the colors, the more affluent they were. And the canal ran through some pretty deprived areas, which is not surprising given the kind of post-industrial context or history. So we did a study which is the kind of Glasgow Canal Access and Environmental Improvement Strategy, which tried to address some of those issues. And I mean, that's a presentation in its own right, but the overall summary conclusions were that the canal contributes positively to arterial routes in and out of the city, along with major road corridors and the River Kelvin. But what it did was act as a barrier to the more orbital routes, especially between the north and the west of the city. And the west of the city is where you have the university, the colleges, the shops, the parks, the museums, whereas the north of the city really lacks in basic civic services and institutions. And so the strategy was very much about trying to break down the barrier of the canal and contribute to the wider connectivity of the city, but also recognizing at locations where you break down that barrier, you can actually introduce new destinations, new points of interest, new catalysts and stimulus for wider economic and social regeneration. We were then asked to look at one area in particular, which was a kind of 1 kilometre square area incorporating the communities of Firhill, Hamilton Hill, and Woodside. And this is fantastic historic images from the 1960s, which is quite useful because you can see the canal snaking its way through the city. You can see the kind of derelict post-industrial landscape on either side of the canal, which incorporates quite unique water bodies and features. And you can see the clay pit, which is this earthwork in the middle. And this is where they used to extract clay in the 18th, 19th centuries to line the canal network in the central belt of Scotland. And for the football fans out there, this is Partick Thistle, the third football team in Scotland. Sorry, in Glasgow, I should say. Just a few images of what the site was like when we started the study. Basically poor environmental quality, poor environmental or quite a lot of barriers, so quite a lot of industrial palisade fencing, lots of walls with barbed wire on top, poor housing stock, overgrown vegetation that was pretty uninviting. But in amongst it, you had some pretty positive attributes. So you had the canal itself, which had a kind of wild characteristic. You had spaces that were little known to people. So if you knew where the gaps in the fences were, you could get in and experience these wide open spaces. And because the canal is on a contour through the city, you actually had this amazing kind of panoramic view. And it's amazing how many people I speak to who live in Glasgow, work in Glasgow, who did not know that this place existed. So we were asked to do a charrette process or undertake a charrette process. It was an intensive 4-day community stakeholder engagement process. We started at day one, having undertaken some baseline analysis, and we worked with the community and stakeholders over a 4-day period, undertaking study tours, We had an art outreach program. We had various workshops, presentations, and it was an iterative process where at the end of it, we ended up with 3 primary outputs. One was a vision, which was quite simple, but it was about the 3 communities being regenerated with new housing stock, being diverse, being healthy, having vitality, being connected to each other, using the canal as an opportunity for new activities and having activity nodes, and using the canal for health and well-being activities. And at the center of it was a new meaningful green space that was more connected and offered much more to these local deprived communities. That then led to a development framework, which, to cut a very long story short, was eventually adopted as a material consideration by the City Council. And the final output was a draft master plan for an area, a large area, 17 hectares of vacant and derelict land, which became the Claypits master plan. So what is the Claypits master plan? Critical to the whole thing is a new bridge across the canal. It's a retractable bridge to allow vessels to still navigate the canal channel itself. But it is a vital new link across the canal, linking the communities on either side and offering a key gateway into this new meaningful green space. We've introduced about 1.5 kilometres of new path infrastructure. So that's paths, boardwalks, new bridges. And we have established or created 5 strategic gateways into and out of this new green space. And these spaces each have their own kind of community function. So they're kind of gathering spaces, orientation spaces in their own right. And these spaces, some of these were gaps and fences earlier, and some of them have been introduced as completely new gateway spaces. The critical one is possibly Garscube Link. It has to overcome an 8-metre level change between the canal and surrounding street network. And we worked a little bit with NHS Scotland. They wanted to see this a kind of uplift in specification, and working with artists to create something really quite distinctive and create this kind of front door to the Claypit site itself. Activity nodes. So we very much wanted people to come not only to experience the green space, but to explore it and have a variety of different functions. So whether that's play features, artwork, interpretation, trails, viewpoints, fishing, water sports. It's really quite a diverse space that offers a multitude of functions. And integrated SUDs, again, responding to kind of climate resilience, so working with different stakeholders and allowing developers in the surrounding area to use the clay pits as a means to discharge their surface water into the canal via the clay pits itself. Habitat creation, there was quite a lot to work with, but it's very much about managing and enhancing a kind of rich mosaic of habitats. So whether that's open water, reed bed habitat, riparian woodland, deciduous woodland, species-rich grasslands, it's pretty much all here, and it's offering kind of unique habitats and unique environmental experiences for these local communities. Living on water infrastructure, so Scottish Canals were quite keen that we actually had people living on the canal in this area, offering relatively affordable accommodation, but also, again, contributing to the vitality of the clay pit site itself. And to do that, we had to introduce quite a lot of infrastructure, make water connections, power connections. We had a lot of work repairing the old canal infrastructure, which in itself is a scheduled monument. So there's quite a lot of sensitivities about restoring the kind of historic features and assets. A few drone pictures that I've pilfered from internet and the Twitter, just to give a flavour of the scale of the site and the surrounding context. And if I've still got time, just to finish off on one more minute. So why is it great? I've got some great pictures to flick through. So it was redesignated from a vacant derelict land to a local nature reserve. It's the only inner city nature reserve in the Glasgow area. It's offering a unique experience close to the city centre. It's about 1 kilometre from the city centre in an area that is disadvantaged. So as I've said, it's offering lots of new opportunities for people who don't have access to the countryside or have limited experience of national parks and wider environmental spaces. New opportunities, again, having stakeholders work together. So we've got the kayak club and the canoe club now set up at the Claypits, working with Partick Thistle, sharing sports facilities to allow this kind of activity to happen. It was used by 800,000 people in 2021. That's about 3,000 people a day on average. It was improving health and well-being by facilitating meaningful access to meaningful green space. There was a very interesting study undertaken by Glasgow Caledonian University that concluded that people living within 700 metres of the newly regenerated Glasgow Canal have 15% lower risk of suffering from cardiovascular disease, a stroke, or hyperextension. It's lowered the risk of diabetes by 12%, obesity by 10%, and it's generally improving connectivity, encouraging active travel, contributing to 20-minute neighbourhoods. And despite what Rishi Sunak says, I still think that's a thing that we should all be encouraging. Generally improving the quality of life. I quite like that Queen's Cross Housing Association on their homepage now has pictures of clay pits rather than their housing stock. And I think that demonstrates the importance of clay pits in terms of improving the quality of life, everyday life for people who live and work in that area. And it's now community managed. So there's huge community participation and management. A lot of the site is now managed by the community of the Claypits Local Nature Reserve group, and they're really amazing about encouraging local groups, organizations, schools to the site, offering tours and different experiences, having lots of events like the one on screen. It's very much inclusive. It's lots of fun. It's quite distinctive. Very memorable. And in a cost of living crisis, it's completely, utterly free. A quick mention to all the various funding partners that were involved, because there was a total value of about 7.5 million to deliver the project, and all the people on screen contributed to this project. And hopefully that wraps me up in about 10 minutes. Lucy.
Minutes over, but it was worth you completing that. Thank you very much, Duncan. That was a fantastic presentation, and I think you answered my question in one of the last slides, which was about management and the community and how it was received, but you sort of answered that one. So we'll pass over my question because there's a couple of questions in the chat that I can see. The first is about the retractable bridge. What mechanism, how many operators are required? Does permission need to be sought in advance to get it opened?
The way it works is that with all the various bridges and lock gates that are mechanical on the canal network, usually what happens is that you effectively book your slot with Scottish Canals, and they either give you a code, or actually if you're traveling long distances, they'll give you a fob key, which opens the control mechanism and allows you to access it. So in the main, the bridge can be operated by boat users. It's relatively easy to operate. It's as simple as a on-off, open, close button. There's various health and safety mechanisms in place, and it's covered by CCTV, so that if something does go wrong or it's left open, then Scottish Canals can override and close it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the other comment or the other question is it's a great example of mineral restoration. Did you work with any mineral operators, county planners, or quarry restoration specialists on this?
In short, no, we didn't, but we did work quite closely with Glasgow City Council's kind of geotech team, and that was largely to do with the fact that a lot of the site was contaminated. It was effectively a huge dumping ground, kind of in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So there's quite a lot of contaminated land issues we had to deal with, and a lot of moving material around and capping it and ensuring that that was sealed in various cells, simplifying lots of technical work here. But yeah, ensuring that there's no leaching of contaminated material into the canal network.
Great, thank you. And there's Stephanie has said thank you as well. So who asked the question? And there was a follow-up question to the bridge. It sounds a bit like a lock, but like for a bridge instead of obviously water movement. And the question is, do people have to get out of the boat to operate the bridge opening function?
They do. So there are pontoons on either side of the bridge. So you park up, if you like, on one side, you go to the pedestal, press the button, the bridge opens. There's sliding gates that stop people from crossing the bridge while it's in the open position. You get back in your boat or barge, sail through, park up, and you go and close it again. Again, that's a very simplistic explanation of what happens, but yeah, that kind of works.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We've got time probably for like one more question. Does anybody want to? I've got one more on the chat. Unless anybody wants to just ask a question on the floor as well. I've got one more. Well, I've got one more question that's appeared in the chat. If it's all right, I'll ask that one, and I'm sure people can follow up afterwards if they want to ask further questions. Was the community management encouraged, or did it come about naturally?
It came about. There was. I'm going all the way back to the original community consultation charrette process, and there was a kind of strong group in the local community that obviously knew about the Claypits site and recognised the potential there, and they were already in liaison with Scottish Canals and the City Council. They were very proactive and actually helped a lot with the charrette process, drumming up interest and support. And that was one of the outcomes of the charrette process, was formalising that group. And they've taken on the management. What I should maybe clarify with the management is that it's slightly more complex than that. So Scottish Canals, they retain management of all the structures, so the likes of the bridges, the boardwalks, and such like. Scottish Water retain responsibility for the hard suds infrastructure, so that's the likes of the outfalls and suds basins, any pipe work, and the community, they very much manage the kind of softer elements of managing habitats and path clearance, litter picking, that kind of thing.
I will. Brilliant. Thank you. Again, thank you so much, everybody. But we do have to choose a winner, and for the completed schemes masterclass category, we have LUC's Claypits scheme. So thank you very much to everybody. I don't know if Duncan, if you'd like to say a couple of words.
Well, thanks very much. Delighted with that. I have no speech prepared whatsoever. You'll be very pleased to hear. What I would probably say is, although I'm here by myself today, there's countless people that also worked not only at LUC, but across the design team, across the client steering group, and most importantly in the community to make that project a success, and funders, I should say as well, importantly. So yeah, on behalf of everyone, thank you very much.